exciting win Saturday night. Kind of found a way to overcome some mistakes and some explosive plays by Oregon State in the fourth quarter, and just really proud of the way our guys kept fighting. Probably the first time where we've been in that situation where we found a way to win the game rather than to give it away. I mean, you can go back to the Troy game, I guess, as well. So there's evidence out there that we're capable of doing this the right way. That if we play with composure and poise and rely on our fundamentals, we're going to have opportunities to be in tight games and potentially win those. And that's always kind of been what we thought we'd have to do here year one, is try to drag some teams into deep water and then see if we can find a way to get it done in the end. So it was a great night in Mackey. Really hope everybody enjoyed themselves. The fans were great. The students were great. The kids were awesome. It was a fun night. And so that was a good win. But now we've got a league win in front of us, an opportunity to play a good Fresno State team at home on Friday night for homecoming, 7:30 kickoff. They're coming off a tough loss. It was really a pretty well played game competitively between Washington State and Fresno State. That was a game probably could have gone either way. Both quarterbacks kind of had some issues with taking care of the football. I'm sure that'll be a point of emphasis for Fresno State this week. Coach Skipper's got his crew ready to go. They've got an experienced, dynamic quarterback in Mikey Keene. Got a good runner. 33 is a good runner, man. He's a physical kid. He does a good job. I like the outside targets they have, 0 and 11 in the slot and then 18 on the other side. As always, Fresno State, I mean, I haven't played Fresno State in a long time, but Fresno State has always had good skill. And this year is no exception. They've got some dynamic players that can blow the top off at wide receiver. We're going to be challenged in that area. And their tight ends are physical players. So I think it's going to be a good game from that perspective, a good matchup. Defensively, this is Coach Quill probably does the best job of anybody we played up to this point of giving multiple looks. You're not really going to get one look, even by down and distance. Even the down and distance tendencies, he's gonna kind of spin the wheel and give you some. He'll give you some three safety looks. They'll play some cover two. They play some man. They bring pressure. They'll play zero at times. They'll play quarters. So there's a lot that you have to prepare for from an offensive standpoint when you're playing a team like Fresno State, and it kind of muddies things up because you're calling plays. And in this case, we may have to have some look-back stuff to be able to get ourselves into a good play because you're not always going to be sure what he's going to give you. And then special teams-wise, this is a team that has always taken a great deal of pride in that phase. And Coach Baxter's one of the better special teams coaches in the country. And I competed against him back in the day when it was the Boise and Fresno battles. And, they've got dynamic return players. They're aggressive in punt block. They've always got good scheme there, and so this will be a challenge. And this is, in spite of the fact that Coach Tedford had to step aside, this is the same basic group of guys. Their roster isn't dramatically different than it was a year ago, and they have some talented players. And I know that not unlike us. Okay, hey, that Washington State, you dropped that one, but this is the one that matters because this is the conference game. And so excited to be at home for this one, especially on a short week, and happy to take any questions.
With this being a Friday game, just from a schedule standpoint, I guess what changes for you guys as you get ready for the game?
You can kind of look at it in a number of different ways. Our normal day off is Thursday, which would be Wednesday this week. What we're going to do this week is give them Saturday off. Okay, so yesterday we brought the guys in. We kind of put the game to bed early, took a little break, came back, had a modified Monday practice yesterday afternoon. Today was our Tuesday practice. Tomorrow's our Wednesday practice. And Wednesday, instead of it being a completely day off, that'll be a heavy film and walkthrough day, so we'll take that day off their body, but mentally we'll get some work, and then we have our Friday practice on Thursday. And so that's kind of how we modified it.
This is historically like one of Nevada's three top rivals. I mean, do you take time during the week to kind of tell the newer guys who maybe aren't from the state about rivalries, or is that not worth the time?
We're trying to find ourselves. I think we worry about, our biggest opponent oftentimes is in the locker room. And so we've got to worry about Nevada right now. I think there'll become a time where we become competitive enough over time that those rivalries can kind of rise to the surface. I think a lot of these kids are from California. A lot of these kids maybe had some connection in recruiting to Fresno. There's connectivity within the staffs. I've known Bax for a long time. Obviously, Coach Armstrong was the old line coach there a year ago, and so I think it'll be a really good Mountain West football game. The Mountain West is super competitive right now. I mean, it's You look at the Colorado State game against San Jose, and you look at San Diego State and Wyoming. I mean, there's kind of one of those flip the coin. The home team usually has the advantage in those situations, and I think that Fresno candidly still has more talent on their roster than we do, and they should be favored going into this game. But our guys have played. We're a battle-tested outfit, and I think our guys have stopped flinching when the moment gets big. Like, hey, we've been here. We've screwed this up, and we've also figured out a way to get it done. And we can learn from the past and recognize the moment, how we responded in the moment, and what the difference was when we had success and when we didn't. And I think those are all really valuable lessons for us.
What do you think the difference was?
We ran the ball really, really effectively the entire game, and so even though we were kind of having some difficulty stopping them, they had equal difficulty stopping us. And I think that when you make those plays, I mean, you get a pick six, you get a long run, that the energy on the sideline starts to swell. And in spite of the fact that, hey, yeah, they executed an onside kick really well and they took the momentum, but what did our defense do? That was the only 3 and out of the game. Like, they rose up in the moment. And they kind of played complementary football throughout the course of the night, even though it wasn't clean and completely, 100% how you want it to be. Our guys' response, our guys' competitive response was much better this week than it has been in past weeks.
I don't know how much you guys use analytics, but ESPN's Football Power Index had Nevada 132nd last year in offensive efficiency, and now you guys are 45th. Where do you feel like you've improved the most as an offense from your first game until now to be able to be, a top 50 offense nationally?
I think we have an identity. I think when you know, hey, this is what we're gonna do, and even if it's not 100% going how we want it to go, we can rely on that. Hey, this is what we do in this situation, right? I think we've got some playmakers that obviously guys like Savon Red and guys like Smitty and Cortez and Marcus, but I think a lot of it comes down to quarterback play, and our quarterback play has been really good. I think he's still leading the conference in completion percentage. We didn't throw the ball a ton, but he did it with his legs, and so he's taking care of the football. We're trying to take some pressure off of him at times by, getting Chuba in there to take a hit or two here and there. So I think that part of it from the players really buying in and working hard to understand and own their role within the system. And then Matt and the offensive coaches doing a great job of putting our guys in positions to do things that they're capable of doing, not asking them just because it's a good play doesn't mean it's a good play for us. And that's something we talk a lot about on the offensive side of the ball is, yeah, that's available, but who's at the point of attack for us? How does our guy look when we ask him to do that? All right, let's shelf that and let's look at the things that we do well, and let's build our scheme each week around what we can do and the strengths of our players. And I credit Matt and our offensive staff for that.
What's been the motivation about getting Chubb out there more in like some gadget play stuff, and how fun has it been just to try to use that skill set and draw up fun plays?
You never know how it's going to go, right? You never know how it's going to go, and I have a lot of confidence in Chuba, in AJ, and in Bilou. But Bilou's our guy right now, man. I mean, it's hard to look at a scenario where you're like, okay, that we're just going to make a change. That's not happening. Like he's the guy. But you've got talent sitting there. How do you utilize that? How do you maximize that? And it also puts a lot of pressure on the defense because this might be one of the biggest statistical anomalies in the history of football, where our starting quarterback is our leading rusher, our leading receiver, and our leading passer, and our backup quarterback, gets passing yards, rushing yards, and receiving yards in a single game. And so you can imagine if you're on the other side and you're looking at, okay, it's not like they're just going to bring that guy in there and throw a double pass. They might do a variety of things. And I think that, that creates an advantage for us. And both of those guys are dynamic athletes, and they're good with the ball in their hand.
What are your thoughts just on Friday games in general? I mean, obviously you get a little bit bigger, stage, but more difficult to get ready for the game.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess maybe years ago when we were in the WAC and we were playing, we played a Sunday night one year when I was at Boise State in Las Cruces. So we all went to the UTEP game on Saturday night, and then stuck around all day, drove to Las Cruces and played New Mexico State on a Sunday night. So I've kind of been a part of this for back a while ago. I really haven't. In the Big Sky we don't play midweek games or Friday night games, and certainly not in the Big 12. And so it's different. I think like UNLV, I think they did it 3 weeks in a row. So that becomes the norm, right? I think it's better sometimes when it's like that than it is when this is we never do this and now it's changing, right? We're all creatures of habit. From a purely, I don't have a problem with it. I think there's an argument to be made. Obviously you take away some of the Friday night lights, right? I mean, that's probably the biggest issue that I have is, you want to be able to celebrate high school football, and traditionally that's been its place. But from the standpoint of us having to do this one time and it being a home game, I don't think that's a huge disadvantage for us. It's just a little bit different schedule, and like you say, maybe you get a little bit bigger stage. I mean, I know who watches Friday night football. I know exactly who watches Friday night. Football coaches watch Friday night football, right? There's nothing else to do when you're in the hotel before the game on Saturday, and so those you'll have some people glued to it that way, and I don't know. It'll be interesting. I obviously haven't done that here.
Coach, earlier in the season, you had to remind yourself that a lot of the guys here hadn't won before in reacting to a win. With an emotional high against Oregon State this past weekend, is there any concern truly flipping the page, or have you seen it from your guys that, they're on to the next one?
Yeah, so Friday night, one of the things I talked to them about is the 3 dimensions of success, which is learn from the past, don't live in the past. Right? The test is right now, so live in the present, live in the now, and then prepare for the future, right? And so the analogy that I used that evening was, do you think Alabama prepared for Vanderbilt the same way they prepared for Georgia? And that should be a lesson to us, regardless of what happens tomorrow. We can't always control the outcomes, but as individuals, we can control our preparation. We can control our ability to move forward and not live in the past, and embrace the test that's in front of us right now. And so that theme carried over into the locker room after the game, and certainly into my conversation with them yesterday as we set the tone for the week. There's no guarantees that 18 to 22-year-olds are gonna hear everything you say, but certainly we've tried to make them aware of the fact that we get nothing on Friday night for what happened last Saturday.
It's been noted, too, with Keene, how many times he's given the ball up for his guys through the air. Obviously, you guys picked it off 4 times last time out. How big do you think takeaways and especially interceptions could be for your defensive guys?
Well, in this past game, I think there was 2 things that happened, and this really started to happen last week against San Jose State. We started to actually hit the quarterback. And what happens when you hit the quarterback? Those things add up over time. It might not be the first time, but when you affect the quarterback, generally speaking, he's not going to step into throws quite as aggressively. Whatever the decision was at San Jose State, we got their guy out of the game. In this last case, I definitely think we affected McCoy throughout the course of the game, and maybe that affected some of his decision-making down the stretch. And, the takeaways were obviously huge. I mean, that was a 14-point swing on Torrey Daffin's pick in the end zone. And that's a big difference in the ball game, obviously.
Coach, do you think that those close losses that you've had throughout the season, at one point you mentioned wanting to turn those into close wins, do you think that this Oregon State game kind of be that positive trajectory for you guys, winning close and then winning big?
Yeah, I think there's always, I'm cautious about saying, oh, that was it, that was the moment, right? Because we haven't put back-to-back wins together, right? So maybe that's the moment, and I think every week is a new test and every week's a new challenge. And for us to be able to say, yeah, that's the breakthrough, I don't know that it's going to be a one-game thing here. I think it's going to have to be a series of positive events that allow us to change our mindset about how we view ourselves and then ultimately how others view us. And that's what we're trying to do here is we're trying to microwave a culture fix. And it's candidly, it's heavy lifting. It's exhausting. And it's gratifying when you do see these small victories. And hopefully those small victories start to become bigger ones.
Speaking of small victories, I imagine you want more than 3 wins this season, but most wins since 2021. What does that mean to you at this point in your first year?
Doesn't mean a doggone thing. It means we play Fresno State at 7:30 Friday night.
Talk about the difficulties of fixing the culture and how exhausting it is. I guess what's been the most difficult part?
The difference, every situation is very unique. And I think as a head coach, when you take a new job, you always have to remember that is not the last place I was at. Okay, so when we went through a culture change at Texas during my 3 years there, this is not Texas. The culture change at Montana State, this is not Montana State. The biggest difference now is how diverse your locker room becomes when you're trying to rebuild a roster. And I'm not talking about ethnicity or where they're from geographically. I'm talking about the guys that are the one-year guys that are here just to kind of get theirs. Are they going to buy into the team identity and the team culture? The guys that are holdovers from the previous regime, the freshmen that come in, the multi-year transfers that you bring. I mean, it's just such a hodgepodge in the locker room, and understanding that everybody's coming at it from a different perspective, right? And, there's guys on this roster that played at 4 different colleges or universities. And I can ask them, what do you think? How are we doing? And because they've seen it. They've been a part of whether it's a rebuild or a successful program. And I think that's the biggest challenge, I think, now is just how diverse your locker room is in terms of what their personal agendas are, and how can you get them to drop their baggage at the door, buy into the team message, and push forward together. That's the biggest challenge. It's actually kind of one of the funnest parts, but it's also one of the most frustrating at times.
How much of an advantage is it that Coach Armstrong was at Fresno State last year?
I don't know that it's going to be a huge advantage. He's not calling the defenses, so that's probably not going to, it's not going to be a lot of help for us to say, hey, Brian, if you know it's a pass, could you, knock on your head or something like that. I think that he's familiar. It's more about him being familiar with the personnel than it is about the scheme. And I think he obviously coached the offensive line, so he's going to have an opinion about the offensive line. But I don't see that as a huge advantage in this profession. It's just like your locker room. I mean, surprised that we don't have a kid that played at Fresno at one point in time or another, right? So in your locker room, pretty much everywhere you are, there's going to be crossover in a lot of the opponents that you play, and it's the same thing in the coaching staff. So there's a ton of familiar. Like last week, it was like old home week for me with all the guys that I know on the Oregon State staff. And so, especially out west, there's not a lot of schools. We all kind of get on the merry-go-round and coach at a bunch of them at one point in time or another. So I don't see that as a huge advantage.
I mean, it seemed like Fresno State had maybe the best offensive talent in the Mountain West entering the season. I don't know that they've been as productive as that talent would indicate. I mean, have you been surprised at all at their offensive output this season?
No, I mean, their starting running back was down, and I think it took them a while to kind of figure that out. And I do like the way 33's running the ball. You can see every year takes on a life of its own, right? And you can kind of see the identity starting to become more galvanized. They are definitely running the ball more efficiently and better than they did a year ago. They relied a lot on Mikey Keene last year in terms of the pass game, and so maybe that's the one thing that doesn't look as dynamic because they're doing more to control the clock.
You guys play Ashton Genty later this year. Just what have been your thoughts on somebody from the Mountain West potentially being in the Heisman mix? I mean, it seems like he's a front runner right now. Is that good for the conference?
Yeah, which conference are we talking about? So I think it's good.
I think he will only play in the Mountain
Ashton
West.
Genty, and it's good for any Group of 5 player that has the type of performance that he has. I mean, he's a tremendous player. One of his teammates was a guy named Jalen Ford when he played at Lone Star, and Jalen played for me at Texas. And I mean, Jalen just was so complimentary of the type of young man that Ashton is. So I think it's awesome when good things happen to good people. Number one, he's a tremendous player. They have a really good team. So I think that combination is awesome for the exposure that it brings to West Coast football and the Mountain West right now. We went through a similar thing when Kellen was kind of a guy that was mentioned. There was a little bit of buzz about a guy named Doug Martin back then. So I think it's hard to argue with the fact that this guy's one of the best football players in the country. So I think it's cool.
Savon got, I think, more than double his previous career high in single game carries, I guess. What made you want to put that game kind of on his shoulders a little bit more?
Well, I don't know if it was putting it on his shoulders. One of the things that we really talked about after the San Jose State game was you look at this guy's yards per touch, and they're extremely high. But he was averaging about 11 to 12 touches a game. And I'm like, look, if you tap your helmet and you take yourself out of the game, you can't complain about not getting that carry. Right? Let's learn from this, okay? And so it was kind of like leave him out there until we have to cart him off, right? And then during the game, the guy's a character, man. I can't even the conversations that I'm having walking down the side, and he's like, "Hey, coach, you thinking about using a timeout?" I'm like, "Go get on the bike, man." So we're better off with him on the field in a variety of ways. We might have to find a way to play him on defense too.
One of his other teammates at Texas, Kai Wood, seems like he's getting a little bit bigger of a role. He's been out on the field a little bit more. I guess, what does he bring that group? Why have you guys tried to involve him a little more?
Yeah, he's a slippery runner. and he's fast. He's got good speed, and he's played well on special teams. We've got some roles for him. I just think in general that's one of the things that our offense has done a really good job of. Is as you know, we don't know what we have. Matt wasn't here in the spring. So it's like, okay, this is what we got. We go through a few games, and you're like, okay, how do we figure out a way to have this guy help us win a football game or give this guy a role where he can be impactful? And I know it doesn't show up in the stat sheet, but guys like, Nate Burleson's been playing a lot more downs for us, right? And I think that's going to be impactful to see not only for now if we get a guy nicked up or whatever, but use his skill set. And then now we've got a guy who's played in a lot of games as he comes into his own and has to be a guy that's maybe a primary receiver in the future. And so I think that Kai's a small example of that. But, one of the cool things is, like in this game, we played without 2 starting offensive linemen and our best interior D lineman. Like Machiavelli didn't play, okay? Spencer Lovell was a game-time scratch because of illness. And that was tough to take, right? And then Frank ended up splitting time with Josiah Timoteo because Josiah had a little bit of an ankle. So for us to overcome those things, and we're not a deep football team, but those guys owned their role and they stepped into it. And I think that everybody on that offensive side of the ball knowing, hey, if I perform at a high level and I can own one thing and do it really well, that's going to be my opportunity to get out there and help the team.
I was going to ask about Spencer and Machiavelli. Are either of those like long-term situations?
No,
Sounds like.
no, I don't think so. I think it's just Spence was just an illness. It was like I've never been anywhere where we've had, like, usually everywhere you go, you're going to kind of get this. The weather starts to change and you get the kind of the flu run. But we've had this intestinal thing that's just kind of been lingering for almost a month now. We've been kind of having guys in and out, and so hopefully that's finally run its course.
You mentioned some of the injuries. Do you have any update on the status of Naki, if he'll be available?
I don't think he'll be available this week, no.
Was there anything serious?
Well, we'll see. We'll see. It's kind of one of those deals where we got to wait and see. We got to let the swelling go down. Today's a big day for that, and kind of see where everything's at.
Is it his arm or?
Yeah, it was his arm. Yeah.
I believe it was last week where you had mentioned your goal was 6 penalties against San Jose State, and you guys had 6 in this game. I guess just what progress do you feel like your group has made in that?
Well, area? I think that rock bottom for our post snap penalties was San Jose, when you just recognize, like, okay, hey, if we just eliminate this, and the players were the ones that initiated some conversation about that. So that gives me hope, because you win in the locker room first. I can talk all I want, but until those kids decide that's enough, it's not going to change. And I think they decided that was enough.
What does that just show maybe about the veterans that are in there and how the group is maturing? I know you've spoke a lot about that too, but just how each week that's continuing to
grow. I think that's been cool to see. I really do think that there's guys in this organization, a lot of guys in this organization, that are becoming teammates, becoming, Wolfpack guys, Nevada boys, and they recognize that, part of their legacy is what happens here, even if this is the one year they play here. And if they can be the bridge to changing our community and our program and our university in a positive way, there's a lot of value in that for them in the future.